Under the leadership of Genghis Khan, the Mongol Empire transformed scattered nomadic tribes of Central Asia into the largest contiguous land empire in human history in little more than a century. Stretching from the frozen expanses of Siberia to the plains of Hungary, it permanently reshaped warfare, trade, politics, and the connections between civilizations. Like, subscribe, and share. Let us begin. The origins of this extraordinary rise lie in the harsh and isolated steppes of Central Asia at the end of the 11th century, where life was defined by scarcity, violence, and constant struggle. Before unification, the Mongols were not a single political entity, but a collection of rival clans and tribes, Mongols, Tatars, Karites, and Naimans, locked in endless conflict over pasture land, horses, and power. Their way of life was fundamentally nomadic and pastoral, dependent on herds of sheep, goats, and above all horses. The Mongol horse, small yet remarkably strong and resilient, stood at the center of their existence. It was their transport, a source of sustenance through fermented mare's milk known as kumis, and most importantly, the platform from which they waged war. Within clans, social structures were relatively fluid and based on ability, but between tribes, competition was ruthless. Life revolved around migration, self-reliance, and a strict code of honor in which betrayal and vengeance were as common as the deadly winters. Law was simple and unforgiving. Power created right. Long winters and recurring droughts intensified tensions, forcing clans into violent raids to steal livestock and secure survival. It was within this brutal environment of competition and endurance that Temujin was born around 1162. Temujin's childhood was a relentless test of survival. After his father Yesugei, leader of the Borjigin clan, was poisoned by enemies, Temujin, his mother Helun, and his siblings were abandoned by their own people. Cast out as outcasts, they survived by hunting rodents, birds, and fish. This experience of hunger, humiliation, and betrayal forged in Temujin an unyielding toughness and a deep understanding of how fragile tribal loyalty truly was. One of the darkest chapters of his youth came when he was captured and enslaved by the Taichid clan. Although he eventually escaped, the experience left a permanent mark. He resolved that any power he built would rest on unbreakable unity and absolute loyalty. Throughout these hardships, his mother Hulun played a decisive role, instilling resilience, discipline, and an iron will to survive in her children. Temujin's rise to power was not the result of chance or destiny, but of deliberate effort, patience, and calculated action. He forged alliances, demonstrated loyalty, used force when necessary, and struck ruthlessly when opportunities arose. Among his earliest and most important allies were Togrul Khan of the Karites, a longtime friend of his father, and his childhood companion Jamuka, who would later become his most dangerous rival. These early alliances provided Temujin with the military foundation he needed. Through a combination of diplomacy and relentless campaigns, he gradually absorbed or destroyed rival tribes. His true genius lay not merely on the battlefield, but in his ability to transcend blood ties and tribal divisions to create a new military identity. Where traditional systems distributed rank and spoils by lineage, Temujin promoted men based on ability, courage, and loyalty. His followers, known as nokers, rose through merit alone. This radical meritocracy gave his army extraordinary cohesion. Instead of exterminating defeated enemies, Temujin often incorporated them, along with their families, into his growing domain. By tying their survival and prosperity to his success, he turned former enemies into loyal Mongols. This long struggle reached its decisive moment in 1206, when a great Kurultai was held on the banks of the Onon River. There, Temujin was proclaimed Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler. The Mongol state, the great Mongol nation, was formally born. This was not merely a change of title, but the beginning of a new era in which tribal feuds were replaced by a centralized and unified state with a single purpose: domination of the world. With the steppes united, Genghis Khan turned his gaze toward the wealthy and sedentary civilizations surrounding his homeland. The objective of his early campaigns was not simply territorial conquest, but economic necessity. trade routes had to be secured, luxury goods acquired, and above all, an army built for war had to be kept united through continuous success and plunder. The traditional nomadic economy had reached its limits. Expansion was the only way to sustain unity. Mongol military supremacy rested on several combined factors. First was unmatched mobility. Mongol warriors were expert horsemen from childhood, and each fighter maintained several spare mounts, allowing armies to travel immense distances at astonishing speed. They survived on kumis and dried meat, freeing them from supply lines. Their primary weapon, the Mongol composite bow, was a masterpiece of military technology, capable of deadly accuracy and power even at full gallop. Using hit-and-run tactics, they shattered slower, heavily armored armies long before close combat began. Equally crucial was discipline and organization. Genghis Khan imposed a strict decimal system. 10 men formed a unit, 10 units made 100, 10 hundreds made 1,000, and 10 thousands formed a tumen. This structure ensured clear command and allowed complex maneuvers across vast distances. Desertion and disobedience were punished by death for the entire unit, enforcing iron discipline. Intelligence gathering and planning were vital as well. Mongol scouts collected detailed information on terrain, climate, routes, and enemy strength. Deception and psychological warfare were integral to their strategy. Although initially inexperienced in siege warfare, the Mongols adapted quickly. By capturing Chinese and Persian engineers, they mastered catapults, trebuchets, and other siege technologies, turning enemy expertise into tools of conquest. Northern China's Jin dynasty was the first great sedentary power to face the Mongol onslaught. After subduing the Western Xia to secure their flank, Mongol forces launched major campaigns against the Jin beginning in 1211. In 1215, the fall of Zhongdu, modern Beijing, sent shockwaves across Asia, signaling the rise of a terrifying new power. The westward expansion was triggered by a diplomatic outrage. Seeking stable trade relations with the Khwarezmian Empire, Genghis Khan sent a large caravan and diplomatic mission in 1218. The governor of Otrar accused them of espionage, seized their goods, and executed them. When Genghis demanded justice, Shah Muhammad II not only refused but executed a Mongol envoy. This violation of sacred diplomatic norms unleashed Mongol fury. Between 1219 and 1221, Central Asia was devastated. Cities such as Bukhara, Samarkand, and Urgench were besieged and destroyed. Terror was used deliberately to force future cities into submission. Millions perished, and irrigation systems were ruined for generations. This campaign also showcased extraordinary military innovation. Mongol armies advanced in multiple columns, encircling enemies and civilian populations alike. The legendary pursuit by Subutai and Jebe across Persia to the Caspian Sea remains one of history's greatest cavalry operations. No power, however wealthy or fortified, was safe. Genghis Khan died in 1227 while completing the destruction of the Western Xia. His burial was kept secret to preserve the mystique of his power. His legacy extended far beyond conquest. He established the Yasa, a body of laws governing civil and military life, emphasizing loyalty, discipline, justice, and religious tolerance. After his death, the empire was divided among his sons into ulas, while remaining nominally united under a great Khan. Ogedei Khan, elected in 1229, presided over the empire's golden age. Under his rule, the capital Karakoram was developed, the Yam postal relay system established, and a sophisticated administration adopted from Chinese and Persian models. Expansion continued at a relentless pace. Northern China was fully conquered, and Mongol armies advanced into Europe. Russian principalities fell one by one, and in 1241, Mongol forces crushed European armies in Poland and Hungary. Europe stood in terror, expecting invasion to continue westward, but the death of Ogedei forced Mongol leaders to return east for succession proceedings. Although the unified empire eventually fractured into independent khanats, its impact endured. The Pax Mongolica created unprecedented security along the Silk Road, enabling trade, communication, and cultural exchange across Eurasia. Technologies such as gunpowder, Printing, paper money, medical knowledge, and cartography flowed westward, accelerating Europe's development. At the same time, these networks facilitated the spread of the Black Death, devastating populations across continents. Mongol society itself was distinctive. Women enjoyed relatively high status, managing households, controlling property, and at times ruling as regents. Religious tolerance was official policy, driven by pragmatism rather than idealism. The yam system allowed messengers to travel hundreds of kilometers per day, binding the vast empire together. In time, internal conflict, cultural assimilation, and emerging powers weakened each khanate. Yet the Mongol legacy lived on, revived by figures such as Timur, who claimed succession to Genghis Khan's vision. Genghis Khan remains history's archetypal nomadic conqueror, a leader whose discipline, strategy, and relentless will reshaped the world. The Mongol Empire was ultimately a force of radical transformation, destroying old orders while laying foundations for the modern interconnected world. Like, subscribe, and share. Until next time.